From Hummingbird Tarot, and today I am doing a video response to Simon at the Hermit's Cave, and that is my top 10 favorite tarot decks of all time. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell so you're notified every week when I upload a new video. Okay, 10 decks of all times. That was really hard. It was really hard. So I have 10 decks here with 2 honorable mentions, and I'll just go through these. I'll let you know what it is that I like about these decks and why they are my favorites. Some of them are classics and some of them are fairly new, but these are decks that I have consistently loved for years, or if they're a fairly new addition to my collection, I really appreciate how long I think these decks are going to be around. I've been reading tarot for over 25 years now, so I kind of have a better idea now which decks I think that I'm going to continue to use and love for long into the future, and so I feel fairly comfortable with these newer decks, adding them into here. So I'm going to go ahead and start with, these don't count as 2 decks, they just count as 1. And this is the Radiant Rider-Waite. This has got to be my favorite version of the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. And I think it's because exactly what the name says, it's radiant. I love the colors of this deck. Here's what the back of the deck looks like. If you see some of the images here, the coloring is just such a great, vibrant blue color, and the yellows are a nice shade of yellow. In some of the Rider-Waite-Smith decks, the yellows are a little glaring, but I definitely appreciate all the colors in here. There isn't anything color-wise that I don't like about this deck, or the way that it's redrawn. I just find the energy that it adds to my readings is really awesome. I love the size, especially of the one that's in the tin. I love the size of this deck, and it's one that's consistently, it travels with me whenever I travel anywhere. If I go to any tarot meetups, the one in the tin is the one that travels with me to those. I consistently use the Radiant Rider-Waite in my readings. It's just a really great deck. Let's back away. So the next one I have, I actually keep, not on the floor. I keep in this bag that my mom brought back for me from Greece, and it is the Everyday Tarot. And this is by Bridget Esselmont. I'm not a huge fan of the box. It's got a magnetic close, but there's this plastic here that you have to undo like a tuck box, and I've ripped this a little bit. I just don't like the box. It's a tiny little book in there that I really haven't used. I kind of flipped through it when I first got it, but the deck, love it, love it, love it. So it's the size of a poker deck. Here's what the back of the deck looks like. And for any of you who've seen my channel, any of my videos on my channel, this deck comes up a lot. It feels very soft and silky in your hands. It's got a matte rose petal finish. And I've been using this deck consistently for several years now, and it looks brand new. Like the gilding that's on the sides, it's the same gold that's used here, but it really hasn't changed at all. The deck still looks brand new. And let me just show you some of the images. If you can look at their skin color, this deck does have diversity in it, which I didn't notice at first when I started using the deck, but you'll see their skin color is white or gold or that deep purple color there. And they're traditional Rider-Waite-Smith images. And the back of the deck, let me show you a closer up version of that. It just has all the suits in it there. I really love this deck. Love how it feels in my hands. It's such an easy read. It's straight to the point. I was a little concerned when I first got the deck how simple some of the images seem to be. There's not a lot going on there, but since I've been reading with it, it's so straight and to the point. Some decks, when there's a lot of images, you find yourself struggling to limit it down to get a little more specific. Sometimes it's too broad, there's too many options. So this is a great deck for beginners as well, and I love this deck. Everything about it, except for the box. I don't like the box. So here's another one. This is the Golden Tarot, and this one's beautiful. It comes in this nice box here, which I used to keep it in, but it's a deck that's so special to me that I keep it actually in a special case by Cat Black, and there is a really really thick guidebook with it. A lot of information in there. I'll get that later. This is actually another bag that I got from my mom when she went to Europe. Isn't that beautiful? It's got, these are sewn with little pieces of ribbon, roses there. Here is what the back of this deck looks like. The edges are gold gilding. It does have some chipping on it, and you can't really tell in this light here, but this deck is based on Renaissance paintings, and they have just put the images that are appropriate for each of the cards. This is based on your standard Rider-Waite-Smith deck as well, and I find it just so stunning. The images are so beautiful, and you can get lost in them, and I like to use this for path work. You can just, for example, you take a look at that card there and just imagine yourself walking into that card and being in there and experiencing everything that's in there, looking around and seeing what else is going on. There's just a lot to work with in this deck. So I really love this deck. It's near and dear to my heart, and it is always in a place of honor, sitting out in this bag here, up on my shelf. So the next deck I wanted to share is the Voyager Tarot. This one is a deck that's been around for a long time. It has a pretty nice book in here. I don't feel the need to use it. I know that some people don't like this deck because it's a collage deck, but I find it such an easy read. I'm really drawn to it. This is what the back of the cards look like, and I've colored the edges blue to match it. I'm going to put down some of this deck. It's a little bit thicker cardstock, and the size of the deck is very similar to an oracle deck. And there is definitely diversity in this deck here, and there is so much to work with. Sometimes I'm in the mood for having a lot of choices and options when I'm reading, and sometimes I like things to be very short, sweet, and to the point. So this is one of those decks you kind of got to be in the mood for, and I like collage decks, and I really appreciate this one. So this next one, it has to be here, and that's the Everyday Witch Tarot deck. It comes in this really great box that the Llewellyn decks come in. There's a place for the deck, and it's got a really great guidebook that comes with it too. I'll show you the guidebook first. All of the cards are in here in full color. So if you're a new student or wanted to just study tarot a little bit more, this is a great guidebook to take with you because you have pictures of cards in here, and then you have the book that you can study as well for additional information. Here's what the back of that deck looks like, and I have colored the sides of this as well. And I am so in love with this deck. Again, it's a super easy read, like some of those other ones. And I love, oh, this is my favorite, probably my favorite tarot card of all time right there, the tarot card, excuse me, the Tower card. And look at the smirk on her face. she knocked that tower down on purpose and is a little cocky with that information. So it's just such a great statement. But the artist did such a great job conveying the messages that she wanted to, the point that she wanted to make. And it's definitely based on Rider-Waite-Smith. And this deck has a great sense of humor. You don't take it too seriously, and because of that, it's like hanging out with a good friend and having them give you feedback in a comforting and caring way, but also being very real with you. So I definitely love this deck, appreciate it. Before I bought this deck, I couldn't understand what everyone thought was so great about this deck, because the images seem a little cartoony if you haven't read with it before. But the more I watched of it, and then when I finally got it and started reading with it, I've had it for several years now, I can definitely see what all the hype is about. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful deck. Highly recommend that one. So this one's another classic. This is the Anna K Tarot. How could I not include this one? I'm not a huge fan of the box, but I'm not using it right now, so I did have it back in the box here. But this one too has a nice thick guidebook. It's got black and white images, which that's purely functional. That's still very functional as well, and you can use this handbook to study the tarot and look at things in a different light. One of the things I really appreciate about this deck, there's what the back of it looks like, is the facial expressions. And if you look, it's not my favorite art that I've ever seen, but you definitely got to give the artist props for conveying the meaning and the emotion of the card. What those people are thinking is very clear. It's very easy to pick up on the energy of these cards. So, I mean, this is definitely a favorite of mine too. The size of this is an oracle deck. The card stock it's not too thick, so it's still fairly easy to shuffle, which is good. It's got a high gloss finish though, so that makes them a little slick and easy to have them go everywhere when you're shuffling them if you're not intentional about your shuffling. If you're shuffling and you're not super paying attention to it, you could end up with cards everywhere. But, I mean, how could I not include that deck? Pretty spectacular. That's also one that I highly recommend to new readers or somebody who is an intuitive reader and just goes off of what they're feeling and the energy they're picking up from the card. This is definitely a good deck for that. Another classic, at least to me anyways, is the Book of Shadows So Below deck. That matches nicely with my background there, doesn't it? And I keep this one in a silk bag. I have a row of hooks on the wall that I've got hanging up there. So this you can buy individually. Here's what the back of the deck looks like. It is a part of a 2-deck set, and the whole deck is called As Above, So Below. And this is the So Below portion of that. It's called the Book of Shadows, As Above, So Below. And I bought just this deck here. They're very different decks. The So Below deck is definitely based on Rider-Waite-Smith, and the As Above deck is kind of its own system. It's got cards that are a little different than Rider-Waite-Smith. Some of them are Rider-Waite-Smith, and it's definitely based, it's a lot more spiritual and has to do with entities up in the spiritual realm. And then this deck is very down to earth, and it uses, this is the Devil card, my favorite Devil card, all about temptation. But I appreciate the everydayness of this deck. And see, there's her self she's looking at there, mirror image. It's just such a great deck showing everyday situations. Very female driven deck, female heavy deck, which I'm okay with. There's a lot that are very male dominant, but This was my soulmate deck. I guess it still is. I don't read with it as much anymore, but I was so scared about possibly losing it or damaging this deck that I do have a backup copy of this one. And I don't have backup copies of too many of my decks. However, every deck that I have a backup copy of is being covered in this video right now. So let's close that up. This next deck here, the Shadowscapes Tarot. This has got to be one of the most beautiful tarot decks. It comes in, again, the nice Llewellyn magnetic box. It's got a nice great book that comes with it. And it has all the images in here. It is black and white, but you can take it with you. Here's what the back of the deck looks like. I wish they put silver gilding around the edges here, because on the inside of the deck there is silver gilding around the edges here, but I gotta tell you, it does have some nudity in it, so I'm just kind of glancing through here real fast. Make sure I'm not going to flash anyone. I'll just show you some of these cards. This is so beautiful. And I guess my only complaint is that I think the cards are too small, and it's really hard to appreciate all the detail. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time with the reflection. It's hard to appreciate all the detail in this deck because the images just aren't big enough. I'm just going to zoom in on one of those. Look at, you see the animal creatures down below there? So pretty. Such a stunning deck. Absolutely beautiful. One of my all-time favorite decks. And I would put up with bigger cardstock for this deck to be able to see those images. Oh, there's some decks that are big that I just feel like they're kind of ridiculous how big they are, because I don't feel like there's any benefit to them being big other than them just being big. But yeah, this will be no surprise to a lot of you. This next one is the Druid Craft tarot deck, and I am so in love with Will Worthington's artwork. I think I have all of his decks in my collection. I actually made myself a plaid bag for this one. It's plaid flannel. Very nice. And I have trimmed my deck. Here's what the back of this deck looks like. And I've colored the edges to match. And then I actually, the first time I trimmed this card, it had, these cards are huge the way they normally come. This is one of the ones I just felt like it was ridiculous how big the cards were. They didn't need to be that big. And I trimmed off just some of the borders, and I did a terrible job at it, and they were okay, but it wasn't completely even, and I fixed a bad deck mod. So I will link to that as well so that you can see this, what I did to clean it up. But his artwork is so beautiful. I love the imagery here. I do have Irish and Scottish in my heritage, so I definitely appreciate this deck more. I think because of that, I feel some connection to my roots. And it's just very easy to get across the meaning of the cards. Very Rider-Waite-Smith based. So if you know that deck, you can read these. And I'm obviously, if you haven't figured it out already, I am a Rider-Waite-Smith fan. So this has got to be, I mean, right up there. On this favorite list, this is right at the top of the list. Last but not least, the top 10, and then I have 2 honorable mentions after that. I keep this in this bag here, and you're not going to be surprised by what's coming out. The Light Seers tarot deck. This comes in a great box. This is the mass market version. I'm not a huge buyer of indie decks. I've gotten burned a couple times, but I also keep myself on a pretty tight budget, and I can normally buy 2 or 3 mass market decks for the price that I can pay for an indie deck. And there's so many great decks out there. I haven't really felt the need to cut into my budget, if I can buy 2 or 3 decks over one, then I'm definitely choosing that option every time. So it's got a great guidebook in here that goes into each of the cards. So if you're studying tarot, this is a nice book, great size to carry with you. And the back of the deck looks like that. I have actually edged the cards in whatever color I felt like the card was calling for. Just flip through some of these images. There is definitely diversity in this deck here. Racial diversity. That's one of my favorite cards in this deck. So cool. I wish this deck was a little easier to handle. It's kind of, the cardstock is thick, and with the cards being your traditional tarot card size, I'm losing words in my brain here. With it being the thicker cardstock, it's kind of cumbersome to shuffle. So I really have to be very deliberate, and I shuffle this deck like this, just taking my time. But the artwork in this deck is some of the most beautiful artwork in a tarot deck that I have ever seen. So as far as the artwork goes, the Shadowscapes, the Druid Craft, the Light Seers. Such great artwork. And again, the Golden Tarot, the artwork in here is stunning and beautiful, but this was painted by Renaissance artists many, many years ago, and I think every card, there may be some duplications of the artists in there, but they're all painted by different artists. So I just got to give my props up to, as far as artwork goes, those 3 that I mentioned, the Druid Craft, Shadowscapes, and Light Seers. Stunning, stunning artwork in those. And then I have a couple of honorable mentions that I want to make, decks that I really appreciate as well. This is by Barbara Moore. I'm a huge fan of Barbara Moore's as well. This is Tarot Made Easy. This is a deck and book set. This is by Llewellyn. It's a tuck box here. And they do have a nice big book. This is called Tarot Made Easy for the set, if you want to buy the deck and book set. And then if you want just the deck, it's the Llewellyn Classic Tarot deck that I'm about to show you. I keep it in this great blue and gold bag. And there is a lot of nudity in this deck. Give me just a second. The thing I like about this deck is how approachable it is and how down to earth. Definitely based on Rider-Waite-Smith, one of my favorite backs to a tarot deck. And here is what the images look like. Just I find this deck to be very accessible, very down to earth. Not a lot of racial diversity in here, if any. But I don't know, it's very, very down to earth. This deck called to me. I saw this Kitchen Table Tarot, possibly, in that book. I think so, is the one that she used for that book. And then I saw it in a couple other books that I had read as well. It was the first time that I came across this deck. And spent some time researching it, trying to figure out which deck it was. And I love it. I love it. Not as much as my top 10. And then one more honorable mention, because I love the energy of this deck. Drum roll. The Golden Universal Tarot. And I'm going to let the reflections dry on this. This is like gold gilding all over the box. And this is what the back of this deck looks like. And here's the front. And if you can see the gold gilding on that, this is definitely a Rider-Waite-Smith based deck. And the energy that that gilding adds to every card, I think just adds, I can't even get it to reflect. There we go. I just think it adds so much. These are matte finish cards, so you can see with that shining everywhere that the gold gilding is all over these cards. It's in the background. It's just so beautiful. Let me see if I can get it. I'm having a hard time getting it to reflect without blinding you with my light there. But, oh, it's just such a stunning deck. I love it, and every time I use this deck, I'm just in awe of how beautiful it is and how much energy that gilding adds to the readings. I had a great time going through my decks, pulling these out. I'm so glad you came with me and stuck around for the journey if you're still here at this point. I really had a hard time narrowing it down to that many decks, but I was so happy to participate in this, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you on the next time around. Thanks for stopping by.